Dear Excellencies, colleagues and friends, it's an honor and a true privilege to have been invited to contribute to this timely and important series, Conversations in Times of Pandemic, focusing on human rights and COVID-19. It is opportune that we're holding this discussion on the 20th of November, World Children's Day, at a time when evidence is telling us that the health crisis has not only given rise to a deep social and economic crisis, but one which has in turn become a most serious child rights crisis. I want to commend the Portuguese government and its National Commission for Human Rights for focusing on this series on the critically important theme of the rights of the child, and especially, and even more so, for its conscious effort to shift consideration of the child from an object for protection to a holder of rights. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said there are three main channels through which children are affected by this crisis: infection with the virus itself, the immediate socioeconomic impacts of measures to stop transmission of the virus and end the pandemic, and the potential longer-term effects of delayed implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. As soon as the pandemic hit, we at the UNICEF Office of Research Innocenti decided to set aside other priorities to support a massive research effort needed to understand how the pandemic is affecting children and how best to organize UNICEF's efforts to respond. COVID-19 has cast a long shadow on many domains of children's rights and threatens to undermine hard-won progress towards achievement of the SDGs, now with less than a decade left to go. At a time when we have committed to leaving no one and no child behind, inequalities are increasing. Soon after the initial spread of the virus, schools closed for more than 1.5 billion children. Precious funding for children's health programs such as immunization were diverted. Fears for the children most vulnerable to violence, exploitation and abuse, now locked at home, in some instances with their abusers, began to grow. Even before the pandemic, children's learning was in crisis. Half of 10-year-olds in low and middle-income countries couldn't read a simple sentence. Due to the digital divide, only 26% of children were able to pursue education through online learning. In sub-Saharan Africa, at least half of school children cannot be reached by any online or telecommunication learning programs. The World Bank estimates that global learning losses from 4 months of school closures could amount to $10 trillion of lifetime earning loss for the children affected. Prioritizing reopening schools and providing much-needed catch-up classes are critical. We still lack enough research on how to make digital platforms effective for learning. Beyond the digital divide issue, we need much more evidence on the how-to of making digital learning work at scale, including with offline modalities in low connectivity settings. On a positive note, for the first time ever, UNESCO, UNICEF and the World Bank have jointly produced a new global study summarizing the policy responses of 149 ministries of education. It shows that children in the poorest countries have lost 4 months of schooling since the start of the pandemic. And as part of the Save Our Future campaign, the recent white paper, Averting an Education Catastrophe for the World's Children, brought together hundreds of youth, civil society groups, leading NGOs and UN agencies to identify the priority actions. In terms of child protection, we have grave concerns. ILO and UNICEF have noted the risks of increased child labor forced by school closures and economic shocks. Child marriage may rise due to economic insecurity, as has the enormous care burden on girls and women. As families are locked down together, often in a situation of increasing hardship and stress, domestic violence against women and children poses a serious concern. Evidence from a review of over 40 studies this year now shows that violence against women and children has indeed increased. Research during this time is of course extraordinarily challenging, even more so on issues of violence, harm and abuse, where do no harm is a principle that has to be strictly followed. At Innocenti, we use reviews of evidence from previous health emergencies to help pinpoint and anticipate some of the growing challenges we're likely to see in protecting children, including sexual exploitation leading to sexual violence, early pregnancy and child marriage, the worst forms of child labor, and becoming street-connected as a matter of survival. Innocenti's rapid review of child protection in pandemics also points to the danger of increased stigma and discrimination that can be invoked out of fear about disease spread. We have already seen how certain ethnic groups are targeted as so-called super spreaders, which then becomes a pretext for ethnic discrimination. When services are disrupted, children fall through numerous and widening cracks. Efforts to put schooling back on track can help to some extent, but even these will be hampered if every child's well-being is not being consistently monitored to ensure that they're not exposed to extreme harm and abuse. So on this World Children's Day, I think I can offer no better prescription for protecting children's rights than our 6-point plan to protect our children, to be launched at next month's UN General Assembly special session on COVID-19. It is simple, but powerful when actioned. First, ensure all children learn and close the digital divide. Second, guarantee access to primary health care and vaccines. Third, support mental health and end abuse, violence and neglect of all children. Fourth, increase access to water, sanitation and hygiene and address environmental problems. Fifth, reverse the rise in child poverty and ensure an inclusive recovery for all. And sixth, protect children and their families living through conflict, disaster and displacement. In closing, I would like to touch on this very important theme of leveraging this pandemic to not only reinforce, but to actually reset the way we protect and support our children. As UNICEF is saying, we need to be bold and reimagine the way we care for children by placing them as holders of rights in the center of our lives and communities. Reimagining an improved future, a future fit for all children, starts by fully implementing the Convention of the Rights of the Child. And to do that, we must prioritize taking action based on evidence and with the full, appropriate and genuine engagement of children and young people in decisions that affect them. So thank you once again for inviting me to be part of this extremely important discussion. Thank you so much.